Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Today we're going to take a look at Jupiter turning retrograde in the sign of Gemini, and I'm going to give everybody a few key words, thoughts, themes, and ideas for each rising sign horoscope. You could also listen for your sun sign. So I figured this would be a good way to take a look at Jupiter turning retrograde because, in my opinion, the retrogradations of slow-moving planets are very difficult to interpret outside of natal context, meaning the location in your birth chart. For that reason, I recommend listening to your rising sign horoscope because that will configure to the whole sign version of your birth chart. In Hellenistic astrology, we use whole signs anyway. So to me, this is the best way to see the actual transit location of Jupiter's retrograde in your birth chart right now. You could listen for your sun sign as well, but that's what we're going to do today. Talk a little bit about some of the major themes of retrogrades, of Jupiter retrograde in Gemini, and then give you some thoughts for each of the 12 signs. These are not going to be like super elaborate. We're going to spend a little bit of time giving you some keywords and themes that go along with Jupiter's position in all of the 12 whole sign houses. So that is our agenda for today. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe. We have crossed 70,000 subscribers, and I think, is this crazy, but I think we're going to try to get to 80 by the spring equinox, or the zero Aries point. That gives us what, about half a year to see if we can get all the way to 10,000 more subscribers on the channel. Feels like it's good to set incremental goals. So anyway, thank you everybody for listening. And if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. It's free, helps us grow our business, our work, our community. You can find transcripts of any of these daily talks on the website, nightlightastrology.com. A couple of things to share with you guys. One is Nightlight is hiring. So if you are currently enrolled in a Nightlight program or have been through a Nightlight program, we are giving privilege to people who know the ins and outs of our programs really well or who have been through them. But you can check out the We're Hiring tab on the website. We have a couple of positions open. And again, we're going to be kind of showing preference to people who have been through some of our programs and are actively studying astrology because we want people who are really familiar with the school. Anyway, on that note, check those out. And then you can also see that we have on the events page, go to live talks, my webinar, Myth of Astrological Compatibility, is coming up on the 17th. If you register for that and you can't make it live, you get the recording. That's going to be a fun talk to discuss what kinds of compatibility techniques I think really work and those that don't. And I think you'll be surprised by how simple some of the best techniques are compared to how how ineffective some of the more elaborate techniques are. So anyway, check that one out. But then the one thing I really want to turn everybody on to is the fact that our first year course is coming up on November 16th. Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic, our 1-year immersion into Hellenistic astrology, begins again on November 16th. Very glad to have our pre-registration sale. It lasts until October 15th. So you have just about another week to save on the cost of the course, whether it's a payment plan or the full payment up front. There are a variety of sales going on right now until the 15th. Also, need-based tuition assistance. If you're someone who would like to take the program, but you're on a fixed or limited income, we understand that people are coming from a lot of different backgrounds. And so we encourage you to apply for tuition assistance. We set you up with a payment plan that works on a sliding scale so you can choose what works for your budget. And we want to make sure that people are not priced out of studying a sacred topic like astrology. At the end of today's talk, you'll find an informational video about the course tagged on after the content is over. So if you want to stick around and learn more about the 1-year program, what it includes, how the organization of the class is designed and laid out, take you over to the class website, stuff like that. So stick around afterward if you want to see more on that. Okay, well, on that note, let's get into it. We are looking today at, here we go, stationing Jupiter. You can tell on my program, which is called Solar Fire, you can tell that Jupiter is stationing because of the little S below Jupiter at 21 degrees of Gemini. This is interesting, by the way, because there's a small form of mutual reception that is developing between Jupiter stationing in the bound of Mars and Mars moving through the bound of Jupiter in Cancer. So interesting because the two planets are averse to one another, but they do share mutual reception by bound. That's fascinating, and something that maybe we can speculate on a little later, but I'm not going to say too much about that. It was something I literally noticed as I was gathering my notes this morning. I went, oh, that's fascinating. What I'll tell you right now is that as we go through the horoscopes, you could look at least for the next 4 or 5 days, you could look at the position of Mars in Cancer and the retrograde of Jupiter in Gemini as co-present phenomena. In other words, look at the topics of both houses simultaneously. They may be connected in an interesting way that is sort of flying under the radar because of that mutual reception by bound. Okay, so if that wasn't too galaxy brain for you, let's go ahead and put Aries on the ascendant. And what I'm going to do is work our way through all 12 whole sign house placements of Jupiter turning retrograde in the sign of Gemini and give you some things to think about. But before I do that, I want to talk about some of the major significations of retrogrades in general and then of Jupiter retrograde in Gemini. So first of all, retrogrades, if you can think about it like this, planets are always moving against the grain of the diurnal motion of the sky. So the diurnal motion is that motion that brings the sun and all the planets up in the east, up overhead, setting in the west, down under the earth, and then rising again in the east. It's the rotation of the earth on its axis that gives us that perspective of the diurnal motion. Now, what planets are doing out in space, moving around the sun in their own orbital patterns, is they are moving very slowly against the grain of that diurnal motion. In other words, if you track the movement of Venus against the backdrop of the zodiac day by day, it actually looks like she's moving through the sky toward the east from the west, which is the opposite direction that she's being carried in every day by the diurnal motion. That duality of motion was really, really important for ancient philosophers and mystics who practiced astrology. The contrast of planetary motion versus diurnal motion formed some of the foundational elements of ancient Hellenistic astrology and philosophy. I won't go into that so much, but the main thing is to say that when a planet turns retrograde, their motion is suddenly taking them, rather than moving against the grain of the current, they're being carried with the current. And it's as though their own volition, represented by their direction, their forward direction against the grain, is suddenly lost, and they're swept up into that grander, faster, swifter, all unifying diurnal motion. This is a creative, astronomical, and symbolic picture of saying that planets that turn retrograde lose agency. Now, losing agency can mean a lot of different things. Losing agency could mean that something you're planning, that you're directing, which the planets represent as symbols of our karmic dealings in the world, is suddenly out of your hands. Suddenly, what you're directing or what you're intending is swept up in forces bigger than your own will, which means that your plans could be thwarted, your plans could be delayed, your plans could be set back. Circumstances could arise that create reversals of fortune or direction in life. Now, this could also be a point where you look at that and you go, gosh, that sounds terrible, But on the other hand, when the hand of fate or the hand of destiny takes over, most of us, even if there's a sense that something bigger than me is coming in, when we consider that to be an auspicious thing, we celebrate it. When we consider that to be something thwarting our own will, we curse it. But either way, retrogrades are not good or bad. They're context-specific reversals or turns of fortune where it's almost like a bigger force is taking over. And that bigger force is playing with our conscious intentions or the conscious path that has been laid out and playing out. And all of a sudden, there are setbacks, reversals, delays, shifts, reverses of direction, or things like revisions or periods of reflection or redoing things or going back or reconsidering. Those are all metaphors that also work with the idea of a planet suddenly moving backward. But it's important to recognize that the backwardness is not the only thing. It's also about moving with that primary motion as opposed to against the grain, which for ancients meant something like a surrendering of will or power, which is why a retrograde planet is sometimes called weak. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's ineffective. It just means that there are forces or circumstances that are going to shift the ability for that planet to direct things according to its own agenda. A bigger agenda starts taking over somehow. So it's a really nice way to understand retrogrades once you understand the duality of the motions in the sky and how retrogrades play into that. So when it comes to Jupiter, whenever Jupiter turns retrograde as a principle, because Jupiter is associated with the building or developing of unity, and usually that means something like uh, unity on the level of philosophy and ideas and systematic understandings of things like studying math or science. You start developing a broad understanding of something. You're studying musical theory. You start developing, or a language like astrology. Anything where you start feeling like you have a cohesive, holistic knowledge or understanding of something, a life philosophy, a religious set of principles. These are all Jupiterian. The law, the legal system, governments, all Jupiterian. Education systems. But Jupiter is also very specifically trying to create order or unity or coherence in every single area of life that it touches by its transits. You could be looking at how are things coming together, or how are you shaping and reshaping a sense of cohesion, understanding with respect to love and relationships, or sexuality, or money, or business, or it could be something to do with your own self-concept in the first house, for example. How are you shaping or reshaping a sense of unity within your home or family, given a history that you were born with in that family, right? So Jupiter will also be about the bestowal or blessings, bestowal of blessings or benefits that come and allow us as a byproduct to create a greater sense of unity and wholeness. A lot of people, when they move up in a job, and I've seen this, of course, in my client practice so many times, they get a promotion or they start earning a little bit more money. There's a way in which suddenly they feel like their life is less threatened by uncertainties and instabilities, because there's a little bit more of a sense of safety that comes with earning more money. Jupiter can contribute to that feeling of everything being whole and buoyant, like your ship is going to float. And so, insofar as Jupiter is also always bringing us blessings that help us feel like we have buoyancy, we have optimism, we have faith, we have hope, we have a sense that things are moving along, that we're in a good place. That overall kind of intangible sense of wholeness that we have, which is so connected in the material world to various blessings and benefits and the realization of various ambitions that we have. Jupiter's also contributing in some very mundane ways to those kinds of things. So when Jupiter turns retrograde in any sign, it often means that where there has been a process of building or developing that sense of wholeness, that sense of completeness in whatever way that it is showing up in the birth chart, which we'll visit in a second, that all of a sudden there's a point of reflection, there's a point of revision, or there is a point of actively rethinking something, or there's a process of, you could say, that you're moving through a period of contraction before further expansion can take place. Oftentimes Jupiter's sweeping direct movement brings in a lot of new assets or resources, or it starts building some sense of broader understanding. It starts helping you build that vessel that will float. And then all of a sudden a retrograde comes, and now it's like, okay, well, before we can actually put it out to sea, we have to caulk it, and we have to, kind of fine tune everything. So periods of meaningful revision or reflection are within the overall building of something more unified or whole or beneficial for us is quite common under a Jupiter retrograde. Another thing that can happen is whatever you've been trying to build, suddenly you're going to get some feedback, because it's going to break down, and you're going to realize, oh, this isn't the thing that I'm trying to build or I'm trying to develop. I need to reflect, rethink, and maybe try a different approach, or work toward that overarching sense of well-being and unity in a different way. So sometimes we get feedback that's a little difficult under retrogrades, or sometimes there's a feeling of delay or setback, or having to wait, or going through a brief contractive period in an overall process of building unity and wholeness. And then you could also say that they are philosophical inflection points. Like Jupiter turning retrograde is where you pause and you go, okay, I'm having to rethink or reconsider my perspective. My understanding of something is being refined or deepened. This would be quite common for Jupiter in Gemini, by the way, because we're talking about Jupiter in a mercurial sign that is naturally inquisitive and curious and deconstructive and erratic and magical and chaotic. Mercury is the trickster, Hermes the trickster in a way. And so Jupiter in Gemini here could also be reaching a point where there is just overall the process of Jupiter in Gemini could actually reflect a process of building something through deconstruction. It's like taking something apart and then understanding how everything works together and then building it back up, now having that understanding. So the deconstructive, analytical, rational, skeptical processes that we bring to things while Jupiter is in Gemini are actually part of an overall process of growth and a developing of something whole. But before it gets there, it has to go through places of careful scrutiny or skepticism or something like that. So kind of a potential for a Jupiter retrograde in Gemini would be like a chaotic period of questioning or deconstructing of something that you've been in the process of building. But that Jupiter in Gemini promises for everyone that you're going to have to go through some periods of time where you are carefully deconstructing things in order to understand them at a much deeper level. So that deconstruction process could be signaled by the Jupiter turning retrograde. Another thing that's interesting is that when Jupiter is in its detriment, which it is in the sign of Gemini and Virgo, Mercury ruled signs that are presenting us with that natural opposition between Jupiter and Mercury, that a retrograde can actually signal a time where rather than an active process of deconstruction, reflection, questioning that Jupiter in Gemini signals, the retrograde can actually signal a period of time where the hand of destiny and fate and some larger sense of providence is taking over, which can instill within us a deeper sense of trust for what we've been doing in this area of our life. And I think that's probably the most hopeful interpretation. All right. Well, anyhow, it's always like Jupiter retrogrades to me are always a little abstract because it's hard to it's hard for most of us to think about planets in terms of processes rather than acute events. And a long 1 year of Jupiter through a sign in our chart is really about a process of change. And then you also have the equally abstract properties of Jupiter, which have to do with creating unities and developing a sense of buoyancy and togetherness or understanding or faith or a sense of like wisdom in some area of life. And that's like, it's just like hard to quantify how that's happening. We have to be reflective and we have to look at things through a process-oriented lens. So for that reason, I think looking at our horoscopes today makes the most sense because then we can locate the transit of Jupiter within the whole sign houses. And that's going to give us some clues as to the actual topics. So I'm going to do these briefly for all 12 signs and just give us some keywords and themes. Let's start with Aries, where we see Jupiter. We see Jupiter turning retrograde in your third house. Now, the third house was called the joy of the moon, and it has to do with the environment in which we live, mentally, emotionally, physically. In this sense, it's like the karmic cultural ecology of your life. And a Jupiter retrograde in this area, first of all, there's something like a breakdown and build up of your environment, your habitat. And that could happen through a process of learning and questioning, a process of trying to understand and question what pieces of your environment are doing what for you, which ones you want and which ones you don't want as a part of the psychic environment around you. This is obviously connected pretty closely right now to intimate relationships through the seventh house eclipse that you've just had as well. So some processing of how relationships and environmental factors are shaping your life, what you're trying to build and develop through relationships, and what are the good and valuable pieces of the everyday world around you that you can build upon right now. Those are the kinds of things that come to my mind for Aries. So when we go to Taurus rising, we're looking at this Jupiter stationing and turning retrograde in the second house, which does kind of, again, because the second house is connected to the 10th and the 6th through trines, we're really talking about a house that has a lot to do with career, money, finance, work, development of assets and resources in the world. So this is a year where there is, a good amount of work taking place around the development of assets, the developing of your financial base or a philosophy related to money, spending, debt, resources, business. And with the eclipse in the sixth house, like I think it's interesting that at Nightlight we're hiring right now. We have a couple of positions that are open, and I just find that fascinating since the eclipse for me, I'm a Taurus rising, was in the sixth house, a place of employees. Excuse me, but even if you're not hiring someone, that I think the connection to the sixth house is really interesting because we're really talking about work and strategies related to the everyday grind of work and financial resources um, and maybe a process of building and developing different approaches to money, business, work, etc., which is also echoed by the fact that for Tauruses, Pluto's about to enter your 10th house again, where it started doing some work while Jupiter was in Gemini, entering last spring. So I think for Tauruses, we're talking about an important shifting or turning point with respect to things like money, business, work, and finances. Also, the development of assets and resources in general. Now, for Geminis, we're placing this energy in your first house. And that means that the question of personal development and personal growth, identity, health, psychology, behavior, these are all things that you've been looking at. Jupiter in the first house are often years of great personal development and personal growth, where you feel like you're expanding and growing as a person in really significant ways. It can also occur as you're gaining confidence or growing a sense of mastery or wisdom or understanding, or you're perfecting or getting better at things that are really your gifts and skills that you have to offer the world. I love that for Geminis, there's just been an eclipse in the fifth house. And that eclipse in the fifth house, a place of creativity, was connected to the first in a trine and also the ninth. So this connection between the first and the fifth, to me, for Gemini, speaks to personal growth and development, and really looking at what are your creative gifts that you have to share with the world. How can you get better or become more masterful at sharing your gifts and talents, or more confident? And also, what processes of self-questioning and self-examination do you need to do right now so that you can make more room for the creative elements of your personality to come through and speak? So I see these as pretty intimately connected. Also, it's funny because any kinds of questioning about identity in relation to things like children, parenting, pregnancy could also be a part of this between the first and the fifth. All right, let's go to Cancer. Again, just little brief horoscopes here. And for Cancers, I think this is fascinating. Jupiter is turning retrograde in your 12th house and connected to the eclipse in the fourth house. Now, the fourth, of course, is the place of home and family. And for Cancers, with Mars in your first whole sign house in Cancer, with a long retrograde coming up, it is safe to say that there is a lot of emphasis that is coming now and in the next months with respect to your identity, your health or your body, and its relation to things like home and family karma. Now, with Jupiter in the 12th house, this is a good time to begin questioning things. Jupiter in the 12th is a process of coming to question and scrutinize and understand unconscious dimensions of ourselves, and maybe even of the world in general, or even of our family. When we become more aware of the unconscious dimensions of life within ourselves, within our family background, and how those unconscious or shadow elements have influenced us, or have, for better or worse, we become wiser. And all the way up until the end of May, Jupiter in the 12th house for Cancerians is leading to a point where you will be birthing a new part of yourself. And that development happens because of a close process of reflection, discrimination, and introspection that Jupiter in the 12th is pointing to. I think it's probably specifically in relation to things like home, family, parenting, ancestral karma, that this reflection is I think that the reflection is connected to these themes, and that you're going to see that your growth of the growth that you experience through understanding these dimensions of your life will continue to be a real theme over the next couple of months. All right, let's go on to Leo's. Sorry. So for Leo, we see the Jupiter retrograde in the 11th house. which is the place of friends, allies, groups, benefactors, people that you find to be advantageous for the sake of pursuing your ambitions and dreams in the world. Retrograde here suggests a point that you've been developing or cultivating new connections, new allies, new networks of people, new beneficial connections and groups, and developing a network of allies and friends. And this is a point now where there's going to be an opportunity to reflect on the people that you've surrounded yourself with. And you're going to have an opportunity to continue deepening and developing those connections while also being critical and reflective about which ones are the best to develop. You also see the eclipse that's just happened in the third house, which also suggests that there is a lot of refinement and development happening with respect to the everyday life and culture that you are a part of. Like the everyday environment of the third house is going through a lot of changes right now for Leos. And then when you see that the Jupiter retrograde in the 11th, you think to yourself, the culture and social reality of my life is going through significant change. And so it's an important time to be really thoughtful about, bringing in more and different kinds of people usually helps us grow. Not having any boundaries and bringing in too many people and not the right people will set us back. So these kinds of reflections are critical right now for Leos. All right, let's move on to Virgos. For Virgos, we see that Jupiter is stationing to turn retrograde in the 10th. And we also see that the recent eclipse was in the 2nd. So this speaks for Virgos, this speaks to significant changes coming with respect to things like work, career, money, finances, business. A Jupiter year in your 10th will often bring many opportunities for growth and expansion professionally. And eclipses in the 2nd house at the same time speak to developments around things like money, assets, resources, and overall the financial picture of your life. There's a signal with a solar eclipse that you are cleansing or clearing out things from the past. And that from this point forward, there will be new opportunities or different diverse ways in which you can grow or develop your career, your business, and your assets. And so the Jupiter retrograde is really signaling a space of deeper or greater reflection or change. So I look at this and I think career and money openings and possible revisions are coming for Virgos. All right, let's go ahead. So we'll move now to Libra risings, where we see Jupiter turning directions in the 9th house. And that is going to show connection to the Libra eclipse that was in your 1st house recently. So for Librans, there's this very deep question of identity. And that question of identity through the solar eclipse in your 1st house, which has just come up recently, is also intimately connected to the development of things like philosophy, belief, learning, higher education in the 9th house. I happen to know someone who is going to travel to the country from which their ancestors came from, and they've never been there, and they still have some ancestors there that they'll actually be getting to see, as well as where some of them grew up and stuff like that. They're a Libra. This is a perfect example of that setup where an exploration of identity is coming into contact with things like travel abroad, higher education, religion, and philosophy. It is as though an existential moment is connected to a philosophical moment or a moment of greater reflection or awareness that's coming in that contributes to the deepening process of individuation that's shown there for Libras. That's how I would look at this. Sort of philosophical and personal existential questions coming together beneficially right now for Librans. All right, when we move forward to Scorpios, we get the stationing of Jupiter in the 8th house connected to, we also get the solar eclipse in the 12th house. To put it very simply, there is a possibility that for some Scorpios right now, you are getting the opportunity to see things that have been unseen. I say this because the process of a solar eclipse in the 12th house, with Jupiter turning retrograde in the 8th, will often bring awareness to people about hidden dynamics, often in relationships with other people that you haven't been able to see but can now see clearly. And it's hard to say what kinds of circumstances might come into your life that could suddenly make you aware of hidden dynamics, but this is certainly a combination that could lead to that. Jupiter in the 8th house in Gemini can be said to lead Scorpios right now into a careful and sort of analytical process of understanding what the essence of your relationships are all about. What is the give and take? What am I giving? What am I giving and what am I receiving? Or what is being taken and what am I taking? What debts are owed and what benefits come to me through various relationships? Jupiter reflects a turning point in terms of the give and take in relationships. Hopefully, a process of refinement is taking place, right? A process of evaluating and weighing and looking to create healthier karmic balancing exchanges with other people. If you take on too much, Jupiter in the 8th over a period of time will help you realize you need to receive as much as you give. If you take too much, Jupiter will help you give more than you take. So it's like looking at the exchange rates in relationships and making sure that they're good, you know? And that's happening as a solar eclipse in the 12th is bringing Scorpios into touch with things that they haven't been able to see. And that somehow seeing those things now allows for a different kind of exchange to take place. That's what I'm seeing for Scorpios. All right, let's go forward to Sagittarius. In Sag, we see Jupiter turning retrograde in the 7th, with the eclipse having recently taken place in the 11th. Now, I like this because Jupiter here is bringing about a really important moment of shift or change within relationships. So this is a point where if you have different philosophical perspectives or religious points of view, or if there's some process of looking at ideas and values in relationships, that you're reaching a turning point where the process of reflecting upon what you have in common or what you don't have in common philosophically, religiously, ideologically with others it's reaching an inflection point. It's like this is the time where we become very clear. I'm different than someone. Can I live with that? You know, or is this disagreement too much? On the other hand, this can also reflect a moment of greater or deeper understanding. I haven't been able to see you clearly, and I'm starting to realize something. I'm starting to see or understand something about you that I haven't, and it's really helping me love you more, or compromise more, or soften my own edges. So I like this as kind of like a moment at the table of negotiation, which all relationships have a table of negotiation. And this is an important turning point at that table within relationships. It's coming off the solar eclipse in the 11th house, which speaks to broader and deeper social change in your life overall that is important right now. So how does this broader social change fit into a moment of revision or reflection in intimate relationships? That's what I'm seeing for Sages. All right, so for Capricorns, we are taking this Jupiter here in the 6th house, seeing it turn retrograde. And of course, like all the earth signs, we see these happening in the work houses. So the solar eclipse in the 10th for Caps suggests an ongoing process of revision and change that's been going on in the career for over a year now. And Jupiter in the 6th is adding to or developing skills, wisdom, understanding. I like Jupiter in the 6th. One way I like to think about it is a period of acquisition and development when it comes to the things that contribute to the success of your work. Like there's a lot of chopping of wood and carrying of water in the 6th house, but a very mundane way that takes place in respect to the career is just getting better at things, practicing things, developing or honing or refining skills and abilities. Jupiter in the 6th is particularly good at those things. So I love this as a turning point in the career that is connected to the ongoing reflection upon your skills, your abilities, your understanding of things, what you can cultivate or build or learn, and how that can add to or increase the value of your services or how that could contribute to, sometimes people need to learn or develop new skills because they want to change careers. But skill development, knowledge, ability, the hard work that you're putting in, and the process of that work and development in relation to changes in the career are what I see right now for Capricorns. All right. We put Aquarians next, and this features Jupiter turning retrograde in the 5th house with the recent solar eclipse in the 9th. I like this because the connection here, again, is between the 1st, 5th, and 9th houses. And we can really look at this as a connection between houses that Indian astrologers all related to the idea of Dharma. So that would mean the essence of who you are and the function that you provide to the world through who you are. For Aquarians, there's a sense of being exceptional, and there's always the importance of big, beautiful ideas. Jupiter turning retrograde in the 5th is suggesting a period of reflection and further development of your creative essence and what you have to give to the world that is most creative and makes you the happiest. And also the blessings and benefits of your birth that come with you somehow. Like the 5th house was called the house of good fortune. And as the second from the 4th, it's thought of as the things that come to you as a matter of your birth. I love this because there's a sense of just some of the good fortune you were born to receive being in a process of showing itself right now. And probably that's connecting to things like the development of wisdom, understanding, education, travel abroad, continued development or reflection upon your philosophy or your personal beliefs and values. So I like this as a period for Aquarians of creative development, philosophical development, and all of which is contributing to an important moment of personal transformation with Pluto about to enter your 1st house again. So those are some of the things that come to my mind for Aquarians. All right, with Pisces, we are looking at the position of Jupiter's retrograde in the 4th house, and then again, the eclipse, which is recently in the 8th. Now, these houses were called moksha houses, and they have to do with liberation from the world and some of the deeper spiritual lessons that we are here to learn. Of course, not surprisingly, some of those deepest spiritual lessons are associated with the 4th house of home and family. And so there's a way in which right now, especially with Saturn in your 1st house and Jupiter in the 4th, that your self-understanding and its relation to your family, home, living environment, roots, ancestral karma is that is a real focus. Saturn in the 1st house is always weighty and existential. It's like you're contemplating and carrying some heavier, deep things right now, but they're in a lot of that process of Saturn in the 1st, which will be culminating in the next year, is taking place as a refinement or development of your understanding of family karma is happening through Jupiter in the 4th. I think we're looking at things like debts and elimination of debts, balancing of karmic debts in relationships, at the process of death and rebirth that the 8th house often signifies through deep, meaningful karmic contracts with other souls, and the connection between those heavier soul contracts and family karma or karma related to home, living environment, and so forth. These are the areas that are very active right now for Pisceans. It's going to feel weightier because of Saturn in your 1st house. But overall, I looked at this as the possibility of clearing debts or releasing or letting go of things with respect to, those kind of key karmic relationships with other people and things around home and family. So when I say key karmic relationships, I mean the weightier, more consequential relationships of our lives and how the karma is being leveled or how cosmic fairness or justice is playing out in those relationships, and the connection between those dynamics and things like home and family. So those are the most general themes that I think you're likely to see if you're a Pisces rising. So, okay, those are just like, I like to call them flash horoscopes because they're not like the world's most in-depth. Really what we're trying to do is just tap into the positions in the chart that are really active and speaking, and at least get the wheels turning. Because a lot of the times what happens when you're listening to a horoscope is, I'm reading intuitively and creatively. I'm looking at the symbols and piecing them together and telling a story. But it's the way that when we're listening to that, it will trigger some thematic connection to something slightly different that fits archetypally, but manifests in a way that's very unique to you. So you have to always listen to horoscopes with an eye for the broader symbolism and how you can pull from that to be more personally relevant, right? So always listen to horoscopes with an eye for how you can make connections between the larger universal themes of the houses or the planets or what have you, and your own personal situation. And most of the time, when people listen to horoscopes and they find them resonant, it's because they're able to make that creative and intuitive leap between the description of the archetypes and seeing a match with their own personal circumstances, which very rarely will I ever be able to address specifically, right? Because there's as many specific circumstances as there are people listening to this. So anyway, that's always the task with horoscopes. I hope this was useful. Please stick around after I log off. I'm going to, we're tagging on the informational video about the upcoming year 1 program. There is no better way to learn astrology than to spend a long focus period of time with a group of people that are also interested in growing and learning and developing this language in their lives. You don't have to be a professional to take the course. You don't have to want to be a professional. Of course, if that is your goal, the course completely supports that track. But a lot of people take the course because there is nothing like being able to be your own astrologer. And then you have guides, you have people you listen to at reliable, sources of information. But you yourself can cultivate the understanding of the symbols and the language. And when you do that, it takes you to a whole different level with the role that astrology plays in your life, which is why I recommend at some point that everyone who loves astrology take the time to actually learn it. So yeah, anyway, we start November 16th. Need-based tuition is available if you need a little help to make it happen. Stick around after I log off. You'll hear more about the upcoming course, and I hope to see you guys in class soon. Bye. Hey, everyone. I'm glad that you're sticking around to hear more about the Year 1 program that's coming up. The program starts on November 16th of this fall, and I am here today to tell you all that the program includes and why I think you really like it if you're thinking about studying astrology. So a few practical details about the course as well. The class begins November 16th, as I mentioned, but it takes place on Saturdays from 12 to about 2 or 3 p.m. Eastern Time. So that's 11 to 2 Central, and typically classes are about 2 hours long. Sometimes they run over with Q&A and discussion, but you can always plan for about 2 hours and you won't miss any of the actual lecture content for the day. You may have to duck out a little early if Q&A or discussion is extending. Sometimes it does, which is why we say between 2 and 3 hours, but typically it's around 2. All of the classes are recorded, so if you can't attend live, you are more than welcome to watch the recordings at your own pace and on your own time. You have lifetime access to the recordings, and everything is housed on a student website. I want to actually give you just a little preview of what that student website looks like. So I am going to open up my own version of Thinkific, which is the platform that we use. So here's some of my courses. These are all the Nightlight courses I teach. You can see on the page. But I'm going to tune into, let's go to Nightlight 28, which is the section that began in June of 2024. So here you're going to see that we have orientation instructions, course information, class links, and calendar. Everything that you need to know how to access the course is there. And you'll have a version of this in your own panel that you get set up with when you enroll. And then our lessons are laid out. So lesson 1, we have the video, the audio, the slides, the transcript. We have the Q&A box transcript so you can see what people were saying in the chat box during class. We have flashcards. We have a workbook. We have planet and sign glyph flashcards. We have bonus material, videos that we like from YouTube, that we link you to, say, check this video out, check that video out. They go along with some of the things we talked about in class. So every lesson has material for you to go as far as you want with, but the main thing is the video, audio, slides, transcript, etc. are all listed there so that you can download and watch it on your own time if you can't attend live. Again, the live classes do happen on Saturdays for this cohort, starting November 16th. That is our first day of class. And then going forward, it always meets on Saturdays, and we give you the class schedule to map out. And the breaks that we have, the study sessions that we have, everything's mapped out on the class calendar for you. So those are just a few practical details that, just to kind of start us off with. So I'm going to take you over to the website, which is nightlightastrology.com. And I'm going to share with you some information about the program and sort of walk you through what it includes and what you can expect. So it is an almost year-long program. We typically finish between 10 and 11 months out of the year. It can depend a little bit on some of my teaching and scheduling, because sometimes I teach at conferences and it may delay some of our modules by a week or something like that. But it's typically around 10 to 11 months that the program lasts. So we call it our first year program. At Nightlight, we have a program for absolute beginners. You may want to check that out if you are like brand spanking new. That would be 8 to 10 hours of content that's really meant to set you up for the first year course. We sort of assume that if you're coming into the first year program, you already know a little bit about astrology. For example, you have some familiarity with the signs, planets, and houses. Maybe you know what aspects are, but you want to learn more about what they are. But if you are really at the very total entry level space, then try Astrology for Beginners. And when you take that, you could do that right away and then join the first year course in November, and you'd be perfectly set up for it. But anyhow, in this program, over the course of about a year, we work through 30 lessons that I lead. And those lessons are all 2 to 3 hours each, including lecture, a little break, and a Q&A portion where we open up for people to come on mic and camera and ask questions and have an interactive discussion about the material for the day. The program is broken into modules that cover a variety of topics in ancient Hellenistic astrology. That is the earliest era of horoscopic astrology. And so if you don't know a lot about the different schools of astrology, Hellenistic astrology is going to be the kind of astrology that you see a lot of astrologers practicing nowadays. It's become more popular in the last 30 years or so. And that is due to the fact that a lot of ancient texts with some of the original techniques of horoscopic astrologers were recently translated into the English language, and it's created this renaissance in terms of the use of ancient approaches to astrology. I have a background in modern psychological, archetypal, and evolutionary astrology, and so of course I bring those things to the table, but the course is primarily focused on the excavation of ancient techniques and the spiritual philosophy that ancient astrologers also espoused. The closest thing that I can tell you to what that looks like is, ask this question: do you resonate with the philosophy that you hear me take on my YouTube channel? If so, then you're going to love this course in terms of its philosophical and spiritual approach, because the spiritual approach to astrology that I teach is really at the heart of the program. And that's a big part of my life. I approach astrology from a spiritual standpoint. It doesn't belong to one religion or one particular school of thought, but you will hear me talking about things like the soul, the belief in the transmigration of the soul. You'll hear me talk about the need to be soul-centered in our client approach to counseling in astrology. You'll hear me have an appreciation for psychological dimensions of astrology, but also ancient astrology is really very, very good at developing your predictive capacity. We talk about what kinds of predictions are appropriate, how to make appropriate predictions, how to be the right kind of astrologer for our clients without inducing any fear. So there's a lot of care that goes into the development of this craft. But ancient astrology is really amazing when it comes to honing your predictive abilities. And then what you'll find is in this program, there's also a pretty significant emphasis on the psychological dimensions and client care. Anyhow, we go into the roots of ancient Hellenistic astrology and its techniques in this program, and the 30 classes are broken into modules. We work through the history and philosophy. We work through planets, houses, signs, aspects, essential and accidental dignities. And then we get into approaches to the delineation of natal charts. And then at the end of the program, almost a third of the program is dedicated to live client readings, where you're going to see me meet with a person and apply what we've been studying for an hour-long reading. We take a break, we come back, and then we workshop. How did I do that? Why did I make these choices? How did I handle this or that came up in the reading? And it becomes easily the favorite part for most students of the entire program, because by that point, you've got so much theory that you're really ready to see it put into action. We alternate those live client practice sessions with hands-on practice, where students get to bring chart questions into class that we work on. And that's also something that most people really love. A lot of people will look at the curriculum and say, well, I already know planets, houses, and signs and aspects and dignities. But not if you haven't studied Hellenistic astrology, because the approach that ancient astrologers had to these topics is vastly different from the approach that modern astrologers take. So you will be, in a sense, relearning basic things in a brand new way. And I think a much more enriching, deep, and philosophically clear way. It's really nice to know the why behind things. This program and Hellenistic astrology in general is very good at helping you understand the why behind everything that we do. Also, it's really important to participate when you study astrology in a living lineage. So one of the reasons I don't let people jump ahead to my second or third year programs is because I want you to be entrained to a lineage, a particular way of doing things that comes from an astrologer who has a very living, busy, active practice and who has had teachers themselves. I think that's important for astrological learning. That's the model that my own learning take, and so that's what I really want students to take away from my programs. Anyhow, so all of that aside, the second year program focuses, after we build our understanding of the basic delineation techniques of birth charts, in year 2, we move into timing techniques, which is all about when the karma of a birth chart is going to be active and expressing itself throughout the course of a lifetime. That's year 2. Year 3 focuses on the development of counseling skills at a much deeper level. And then we also have a 1-year horary program, which is about the development of a very specific predictive technique that can be a really amazing tool to add to your kit. That is 4 years worth of training programs that we have. However, I want to mention that many people take our classes just for the sake, purely for the sake of their own personal growth. Taking these programs is very much like being taught how to utilize a technology that for yourself will be deeply useful for the rest of your life, and maybe for close friends or family members around you. Many people come through our programs taking that benefit away. We'll study through all 4 years of our programs with no intention of being professional. This is their hobby. This is a spiritual tool that will have it will pay dividends over a long period of time. However, many people without the intention to practice come into our courses and discover that they're actually good at it and may end up reading for other people part-time. And then there are students who are deeply, intensely motivated to practice for other people. And it is not that our programs really make those people successful. Our programs contribute to your development, but it really is that some people have a calling to practice professionally. And these programs are designed to give you all the tools you need to develop that confidence and to develop a really coherent set of tools and to entrain yourself to a lineage, which you can also develop your own unique style out of. So those are some of the kinds of people that take our programs, you might say. So the 30 classes on the year are then broken into modules. And in between modules, we have 2 course directors who are present in all of the classes, and they lead breakout tutoring sessions where you can come in and review or ask questions about the module that we've just completed, which is usually anywhere between 2 and 3 classes each. So those breakout study sessions led by our tutors are outside of the 30 classes and very useful. A lot of people like to attend those because they also offer opportunity for community and just lively conversation. We also have 12 online webinar classes led by guest teachers that we host throughout the year. Those are free, and if you can't make them live, they're all uploaded into your student folder. You also have an interactive group forum discussion staffed with tutors who typically respond to questions that you have about the material within 24 hours. So if you can't attend a tutoring session or you just have a random question on a Tuesday night, you can pop it in there and you'll get an answer. We also have a ton of bonus material, optional quizzes, flashcards, tons of supplemental material that is there to help people go as deeply as they want. We have a reading list that is expansive. And that reading list, we don't expect anyone to accomplish. It's more so a resource that we give you saying, here, if you want to know all the things I've read, if you want to know all the things that I love, if you want to know all the things I recommend, here's a master list of everything for each lesson. You could go, PhD level if you wanted to and read thousands and thousands of pages, or you might find that there's just one extra book that looks really interesting and you want to pick it up. But we pride ourselves on making sure you have a ton of resources. You have lifetime access to all the class recordings. You can email our staff or me throughout the year with questions, and my staff will also defer to me in the case that they don't know the answer to a question. So that is what the program includes. It starts November 16th. If you would like to join, at the bottom between now and October 15th, our early bird payments are available. So that saves you some money off the cost of the course. There is a 12-month installment plan that is cheaper than our normal plan, a one-time payment that's significantly cheaper than our normal one-time payment. So you get these little sales that we do until October 15th. We also have need-based tuition assistance. So if you are someone who would like to take this program, but you are on a fixed or tight budget, we have an application there. Click apply now. Just tell us what you need. We give a range. We say between this dollar amount and this dollar amount, what can you spend? And then we set you up with a plan for that tuition number per month. And that is available for anyone. We ask people to apply early because those spots are limited, but we are really accommodating. We try to make sure that nobody's priced out of a spiritual education. Like, this topic should be very accessible for people because I believe that the divine is speaking through the sky, and like anyone should have access to understanding what it's saying, right? So anyway, that is a bit about the program. I hope that this has been useful for you. If there are any questions you have, you can look over the curriculum content on the page, on the year one page. There's more information there. Check out the FAQ section for more questions. Email us info@nightlightastrology.com. And I hope to see some of you in class soon. I think this is going to be a really powerful program because it's also starting right as Pluto's moving into Aquarius. And within the year, we're going to have a Uranus-Pluto trine with Uranus in Gemini. These Aries signatures and the connection between Uranus and Pluto make for a very powerful year to advance our understanding of astrology. So it's a great election year for studying, and I hope to see some of you in class soon.